Welcome to episode 12 of the Tavern podcast. Now, I'm going to step up right now and take responsibility for the audio issues on this episode. I lost my end of the audio for the first part of the second half of the episode, and the backup copy we used sounds horrific. I am so sorry about this. It's entirely my fault, and I apologize to you. And frankly, I know I probably sound pretty horrible right now. I'm recording this on my phone instead of our setup because we're actually upgrading our studio right now. We're still working out some kinks in the system. So don't worry about that, though. This episode is amazing. We have with us guests Sam Stewart and Sean Patrick Fannon, who gave us a lot of useful information about getting started in the gaming industry. So if your New Year's resolution is to have a career change into gaming, or if you just want to hear some cool anecdotes from behind the curtain, this episode's for you. So grab a drink at the bar and have a seat at the table in the corner, and we'll be right back after this word from our sponsor.
Hello gamers, I'm Daryl Mott Jr. from Anacle News Tabletop and the Gamers Tavern podcast, which you probably know because I'm betting I was just talking a second ago. I'm sure you already know about DriveThruRPG, as it is the biggest repository for digital copies of your favorite games. Dungeons & Dragons, Shadowrun, Battletech, World of Darkness, Numenera, Fate, and so many more. And sometimes there are pennies on the dollar because, face it, PDFs can sometimes be so much more convenient than print copies, but if you need print copies, they sell those too. So if you want to support the Gamers Tavern podcast, click on the affiliate links in the show notes and check out DriveThruRPG.
Hello and welcome to episode 12 of the Gamers Tavern. I'm Ross Watson.
And I'm Daryl Mott Jr.
And tonight we have a special guest with us, Mr. Sam Stewart from Fantasy Flight Games.
How's it going, guys?
Sam, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
What is your gaming character sheet?
Well, let's see. It's probably going to be reasonable on intelligence but low on dexterity.
I saw a great thing today. It was how to understand these 6 attributes via tomatoes.
Okay.
Strength is the ability to crush a tomato. Dexterity is the ability to throw a tomato. Constitution is the ability to eat a bad tomato. Intelligence is the ability to know that tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. And charisma is the ability to sell a tomato-filled fruit salad.
Wow, that's a pretty good list there. I like that. But
and of course, the immediate response was, "Isn't a tomato-based fruit salad just salsa?" The next response was, "Okay, we found our bard."
Perfect.
But let's not stop Sam from telling listeners just who he is and what they may know him from.
Sorry for interrupting.
No, that's quite all right. Well, I have worked for Fantasy Flight Games for the past, it's been more than 5 years now. And
you're the old man there, aren't you?
At this point, I almost am, at least in temperament. But I have had the opportunity to work on a bunch of the different role-playing games in Fantasy Flight Games, even though I didn't even start as a role-playing producer or designer there. But I worked with Ross on Rogue Trader, then transitioned over into Black Crusade, who some people may recognize, and most recently it has been Edge of the Empire and our Star Wars role-playing game line for me.
And what's the newest Star Wars RPG that's sort of on the horizon?
Oh, yes. Age of Rebellion is actually, that's not actually my baby. That belongs to Andrew Fisher, but we've been... You remember the studio and Fantasy Flight, Ross. It's a very collaborative environment, so we've all been working on it a little bit.
Absolutely. That's awesome to hear.
That's coming out in, I think, February or March? I'm sorry, it's like Q1 2014 or something like that?
Something like that. I actually don't know the exact release dates off the top of my head, but... When you're shipping things over from being printed in other countries, that can be a little tricky to to guess.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. I'm actually very familiar with that issue as well.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to talk tonight about a topic that I think is very near and dear to the hearts of most of our listeners, and that is, how do you get into the gaming industry? How do you become a part of this thing that we love so much? But before we get into that too deeply, there's another thing that we do. We talk about what we've been playing lately on the show. So why don't we start with the guest, Sam? What have you been playing lately?
Let's see. Do you want role-playing games or just games in general?
Games in general is fair for this podcast. So, hit us with what you think is the most interesting and fun things you've been playing lately.
Oh, perfect. Well, I have been playing a little Age of Rebellion. I figure that's almost expected.
Are you playing a Jedi?
I am not. I am playing a world-weary combat medic who's basically, he is the hipster of combat medics in the Rebellion because he was in it before anyone else joined.
Oh, nice. I was fighting the Emperor when it was cool.
No, before it was
cool. Yeah, before it was cool.
I was frozen in carbonite before it was cool. I hoped that one would land. I wasn't sure.
Nice.
No, I appreciate it. No, he joined the Rebellion before the Death Star got blown up and thinks everyone else just jumped on the bandwagon.
Yeah, they're all Johnny-come-latelys, aren't they?
Exactly.
They don't know what it's like to be the few and the proud. That's pretty cool. I like that. It's a good character right away. I can see that.
Yeah. And then in the non-RPG arena, I've been doing some Borderlands 2, which
great game.
Yes. I love Tiny Tina. That is a fantastic character they came up with. And then StarCraft 2, actually.
I just recently did a blog post about my favorite Xbox 360 games, looking back at the console. And of the top 10 lists that I put out there, the number one game that I played on the Xbox 360 was Borderlands 2. Unquestionably.
Yeah, I can totally see that.
Great gameplay, solid aesthetic, and the writing was top-notch.
Absolutely top-notch.
And it's the writing that really sells it for me. If it was just the gameplay, it would be, this is another shooter, and that's good, but it's not amazing, but the writing pushes it over the top.
Well, the characters, too. I mean, if you cannot find some kind of inspiration for an NPC for your campaign from Borderlands 2, and it could be any campaign, I don't care what game you're playing, you're just not trying very hard.
That's totally fair.
So, so anything else, or is that pretty much the list?
Let's just say, I did spend last Saturday teaching a bunch of 10 to 12-year-olds how to play D&D 3.5 at the local library.
Oh, hey, that was pretty cool. Did you sign up to do that? Was it kind of a...
Well, Katrina Ostrander, one of our coworkers, had arranged for it to happen, so I showed up with Max, another one of our coworkers, and 3 of us were doing it. We were running the Vault of the Draco Lich?
Oh, neat.
It's actually a D&D Next adventure designed to be run by multiple groups, and then they're all trying to accomplish a single mission. They come together in the end and basically, try and kill a Draco Lich.
That's the one that was cross-platform, wasn't it, where they published it for 3.5, 4th, and Next?
Yeah, exactly.
Or am I thinking of a different one? Was that one?
Did you guys break it up where each one of you was running it under a different system?
We did not run it under a different system, but we did run it in different groups. And to be perfectly honest, I was impressed with how easy it was to adjust the D&D Next stats on the fly to 3.5. I mean, it helps it helps that everyone's, so familiar with old school Dungeons and Dragons to begin with, but making that transition was actually pretty simple.
I want to make a really quick point here. Our listeners, if you want to hear Daryl and I kind of go deep into the discussion of the different D&D editions, that was actually episode 11. It was the one right before
11.
this, yeah. So if you want to hear us, talk about and wax poetic about all the different editions of Dungeons and Dragons, definitely check out the previous podcast to this one. But Sam, I think that's really awesome that you guys, particularly the RPG department at Fantasy Flight, is doing that kind of outreach to kids and get people into the hobby. I think that's awesome.
Yeah,
Bring in the next generation.
It was a lot of fun, actually, although, and I'm sure you can appreciate this, teaching role-playing games to a bunch of kids sometimes devolves into, here, roll this die. Did you get this? You chop his head off! It's sweet! And not worrying too much about the rules, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Daryl, what have you been up to?
I actually have a perfect segue from him talking about how easy it was to convert Next to 3.5. I'm currently working on a project I've been toying with since last year when the playtest first came out for D&D Next, where I've been doing a home conversion of the Temple of Elemental Evil.
Oh, really?
To Next, and it is, especially with the newest playtest packet, the last one, it is so smooth to just drop those monsters in, and it is really easy to reskin them. And the rules just work great with the tone and the style. I've only gotten up to the what the hell is it called? The little dungeon that's outside of Hamlet.
No, I
Moat
don't.
House.
Oh, yeah.
The Moat House.
Yeah, that's right. It's the Moat House.
I've gotten through the whole Moat House, which means I've gotten all of T1 done. But it was just so simple to just drop stuff in and everything else. It works great, and I cannot wait to be able to see it in action. And I'm also about to start painting my Dwarven Forge that I got from the Kickstarter. Not really painting per se, I'm just giving them a quick dry brush because, like I've said many times on this podcast, I suck at painting, but I think dry brushing is something I won't be able to screw up too much. Just so I can get a little bit of shadow on them. Because they look great unpainted, but I just want a little bit more texture. And I also got that accessory pack that has like the piles of gold and the beds and all that crap. That those you really need to paint.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Well,
so I'm gonna get some help before I touch those.
Just some basic techniques can really add a lot of texture to those Dwarven Forge pieces, and they look great.
They look great, and they're durable as hell. I'm actually about to write up for Anacle News, probably here shortly, a stress test I ran on one of them.
That's awesome.
Where I scientifically did what I could to destroy one, and I haven't completed the test yet. I think the next one is going to be literally throwing it against my concrete porch as hard as I can.
That sounds scientific.
That's
to
the
me.
next test to do any damage whatsoever to the things. So,
well, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, if you don't mind me diverging into model painting for a second.
Sam may know something about model painting, just a little bit.
I've got a few 40k and fantasy armies around for Warhammer. But
you may even have some trophies for painting quality.
I do. Although... No, but if you want a easy way to paint up stuff like that terrain, dry brushing's great, and then also inking. Picking up a few washes. A lot of Games Workshop and Privateer Press both make decent washes, and putting them over the top of once you're finished painting, just covering in the wash. The effect is actually really impressive, and it's super easy to do, especially with something like gold. You just painted a blank color of gold and then wash it in a brown or a black, and it seeps into the cracks. It looks like shadows, and it's almost no work.
You know, I was just thinking...
very handy, especially with the gold and the bed and the doors, trying to get into the cracks and everything. I didn't even think of that, so thank you very much. You just saved me a lot of work.
Yeah, the first thing that came to my mind when you said you were painting, trying to get some shadows and stuff in there was like a stain of some kind or a wash was absolutely first thing came to my mind.
Well, the raw minis on those on the terrain are actually kind of dark, so I figured dry brushing would be the best thing for like the walls and the floors, to kind of highlight the tops of them a little bit and leave the darker material underneath for the cracks.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But for all the other stuff, yeah, that's going to come in handy for all the little accessories and everything.
And if you ever want to get really crazy, you can dry brush and wash it.
Okay, let's not go too
Yeah, let's not get insane here.
Remember, you're talking to the guy who managed to screw up a BattleTech mini whose whole point was to paint it silver.
All right.
With spray paint with primer built in, and I screwed it up.
Now I don't actually have any miniatures I've been painting lately. I moved to a new house this month, so in fact all of my miniatures, all of my paints, all of my tools, everything for painting is basically in my closet in a box because that's what happens when you move and you haven't. It takes time to get everything unpacked and put in the right place. So
I
No.
got stuff packed from 2005 when I moved to Austin the first time.
So no model painting just yet. But I do have to say, like, for some strange reason, for me, the end of 2013 has been kind of like the super retro gaming hour for Ross Watson. In the tabletop arena, my friends and I have been playing Marvel Superheroes, the TSR advanced basic set from the
old face rip.
Yeah, the old face rip edition from the old. I believe it's from the late '80s.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, we've been playing that and just enjoying the hell out of it. I think
it was like 86, 87, something.
It's a really fun rules light system for superheroes, and it just kind of allows us to throw together a beer and pretzels game right away and just get into it. And of course, I have been also doing some more play tests with Accursed.
Oh yes.
More Savage Worlds goodness. So that's what I've been playing in the tabletop arena. And to continue with the Blast from the Past theme, I've been playing Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition, Baldur's Gate 2 Enhanced Edition, actually.
Still working on that?
There's not only the main game, there's also Throne of Baal as part of it. And they put in a new mode, which is called the Black Pits, which is kind of a side story that involves you and a group of characters that you create fully. These are not the companion characters that you can fight in different interesting and challenging tactical battles in an arena, and then there's like a story around you being captured that you have to eventually break out of the arena. So yeah, there's just so much content in that game that I've been playing that for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Well,
and on top of all that, because I did recently this Xbox 360 retrospective, I realized that I hadn't played Mass Effect 2 in a couple of years, and I wanted to dive back into that and just sort of refresh my memory.
You're not going through any time sinks whatsoever at all in video games, are you, Ross? What's
so
up next, Skyrim?
Just
a quick session of that.
Just a quick session of Skyrim, yeah. So those are the things that I've been sort of messing around with in my free time, but that's what we've been playing.
Hmm? Well, Mass Effect 2 is super legit. No, I was about to say, you said quick session of Skyrim, and I'm like, man, I haven't even finished that yet.
I know someone who has had it since launch day, who still hasn't gotten through the first main third of it because they keep reading the books.
And we now have a new guest joining us in the Gamers Tavern tonight. It is Sean Patrick Fannon. Welcome to episode 12 of the Gamers Tavern podcast.
Glad to be here. Sorry I was a little bit late, but stuck in traffic.
Well, parking
kobolds on the road.
Yeah, parking your horse out front of the tavern can be a bit of a problem from time to time.
Yeah, the constables, they just had lost complete control. There was hobgoblins, there was booze, a couple of pissed off dwarves. I don't know.
Booze where? Where's booze?
We are in a tavern, Daryl. So there's that. We want to say it's great having you with us, Sean, tonight, because we are talking about how to get into the gaming industry. But before we do that, I would like you to answer a quick question. We do this to all our guests. Could you tell our listeners what your gaming character sheet is?
Oh, my God. Do we start from the beginning, or do we just kind of count backwards from now?
Sean, it's your character sheet. How is it listed on your character sheet?
Oh, jeez. I think if we were going to talk in Savage Worlds terms, which is the system I'm most well known for these days, I definitely would have a veteran possible. Well, no, I got to say, the guy who created the system calls me legendary, so I'm legendary rank in terms of game design, just because Shane Hensley says so, not because I think so. But I've been doing this since 1988 professionally. I started in 1977. Role-playing and gaming, and actually 77 is when I first started creating what became Shinetar, which is my epic fantasy setting, which is another one of the things I'm probably most well known for. It's a Savage Worlds epic high fantasy setting, but I'm also very well known, as Sam can speak on, for Star Wars work. Did a lot of work, actually not a whole lot of work, but did some work on some stuff for the first version of Star Wars, and I've done considerably more for the current iteration of Star Wars.
By first version, you're talking about the old D6 version?
Yeah, which version?
The D6 version, the D20 version, the Saga version?
No, I worked on the original D6 version, and now I've worked on the Fantasy Flight version. I
Yep.
bypassed
Yes,
all
did.
that D20-ish crap, so you know.
Well, there's no hate on the podcast,
Okay.
so it's fair to say that you may have been disappointed with iterations. Though I think definitely my favorite iterations of Star Wars so far are the D6 and the Edge of the Empire editions.
And that seems to be pretty much universal.
My apologies for using the word crap. I'm sorry. I'm still shook up about the dwarves and the hobgoblins and the spilled beer. But
That's a good excuse. That's the best one I've heard.
But I've actually been very pleased. In fact, I just got a note from somebody on Facebook just as I was trying to find you and connect with you to say hello, I'm out here. But I just got a note from somebody who was really excited about the Explorers book that just came out, Enter the Unknown, and was really happy and was sending me a big congratulations on the work in that one. So I mean, it's some exciting stuff. So Star Wars, the Fantasy Role Playing Gamers Bible, Shinetar, other Savage Worlds work along those lines. A lot of work. My original Foundation work was done with Champions.
Yes, it was, with some fantastic products for my favorite edition of Champions, 4th edition.
So I've got a lot of back.
Okay, hold on, Sean. Let Ross fanboy out a little bit more over Champions.
Yes, my love for the hero system is well known, and part of that love comes from the vibrancy of 4th edition's supplements, because there were just so many good ones. And
I've got some interesting news for you along those lines.
But some of the best ones that I can recall were actually written by Sean Fannon, which was books like High-Tech Enemies and Corporations and Allies, things like that.
Appreciate that. And like I said, I've got some interesting news for you. Don't know if you want to reveal it here on this podcast or save it for another one, but I've had some interesting conversations in the background. But let's just say I'm working on some new superhero stuff that may bring some old stuff back.
Ooh. Oh, are we talking about Doc Digital? Or are we talking about Montgomery International?
Yeah, and Master Control and all the rest. Yes.
Oh my God! Really? Okay, these are the guys from Sean's 4th edition games, and there's some fantastic villains and setups and things that he does there. So I'm excited about that. Hopefully we'll.
Okay, Ross. Do we need to give you a moment to go?
I'm experiencing some very deep fanboy joy right now.
Sorry,
so
Sam. Didn't mean to come in.
No, that's quite all right.
Oh no, that's excellent news. That's excellent news, Sean. All right, so thank you. That's your gaming character sheet to get that straight. And we just recently wrapped up talking about what we've been playing lately. So if you could quickly maybe fill us in on what you've been playing lately.
Well, Shinetar's been eating my life ever since the Kickstarter and the launch of Justice in Life, which is the big, huge shared campaign thing that we're doing globally, which has taken that whole living campaign to the nth degree and actually treating each and every person's gaming experience as though it is a legitimate impact on continuity. That's been a huge brain-breaking, oh my God thing, and it's growing by leaps and bounds. And I'm running 3 different campaigns just in touch to that because people are so excited about it. But I've also been very heavily involved in that superhero stuff that I was talking about, doing a lot of development work along those lines. I really want to be playing other stuff. I really, really do.
Well,
and I'm anxious to play something else sometime soon, but it hasn't been a huge opportunity for me. But when I do get a chance to sit at the table, it's usually Savage Worlds.
Well, there's an interesting point about that there is a crossover adventure being written by the Accursed Trio that links the world of Accursed to Shinetar. And there is another adventure that is being written by Sean Fannon that links Shinetar to Accursed.
Yeah, and we've actually been having that. The foundations of that are actually happening in the official canonical Justice in Life campaign. There's been a whole lot of stuff already happening with the Blood Witch. She's been impacting Shinetar dramatically. There's been a huge storyline going on with that.
It's awesome. It's awesome.
I was going to say, I want to take a quick minute, because I've told you this, Ross, but I didn't get a chance to tell Mr. Fannon this, but congratulations to both of you on getting your Kickstarters funded.
Thank you very much.
I am actually looking really forward to seeing how they turn out, especially when I get my copy of Accursed.
it won't be long before that will be winging its way to backers.
Sam,
So.
do you have at least a PDF of Shintar?
I will probably be picking one up at some point here.
No, I got you hooked up. Don't worry about it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'll take care of that.
And the press wouldn't mind review copies.
Hey, I have my copy as a backer. Thank you very much. So, there you go. But
I'm a reporter, so I'm poor.
No worries.
Oh, please. We work in the game industry. We're all poor.
I was about to say, that kind of leads us into our topic.
It really does, because
we're talking about the game industry in general.
And tonight's topic is all about how you get paid to do what you love. So, absolutely. We should be talking about how people get into the industry. And maybe we should talk first. I think maybe the first question I want to pitch to our guests, and I think since Sean is the recent arrival, we'll hit Sean first and give Sam a chance to answer after Sean. But what are the most common jobs available in the gaming industry today, the tabletop RPG industry?
Well, if you're an artist, you can't not find work if you've got any talent at all. Yeah, that's anybody with artistic ability who can do some good illustration and get it done relatively on time and according to specs. There's just such a demand right now. The only problem there is it's not even that hard to get paid. Actually, it's not that hard to get paid anymore for anybody. But it's a matter of there's a lot of you out there. So but I mean, there's just. Well, really, there's a lot of work for artists. There's a lot of work for editors. There's a lot of work for pretty much anybody. Layout. Let me tell you something. If you know what you're doing with layout, and I mean graphic design elements and putting a book together and getting it ready both for PDF publication and for digital print publication, that is a huge hole right now that anybody with any real skill and ability will be turning down offers. There's almost no question because there's just so much work for you out there. Writers and creators, still that same struggle because everybody's got an idea. Everybody's got a great thought for what would make a cool adventure or a cool this or a cool that. And you're really still competing with a huge body of people trying to get in. But it's a hell of a lot easier to either A, get a license to publish for the property you like, even if you're not going to work directly for the publisher, or B, just go ahead and freaking do it on your own. I mean, that's something that's so much easier now than it ever was.
And we're going to talk about all those things as well later on, because those are all excellent points. That's an excellent answer, Sean. What about you, Sam? What do you think are the jobs that are available out there?
Well, let's see. I think Mr. Fannon put it right when he said that really. There's definitely a lot of work for artists. I think a broader point you can draw from that is there's a lot more work out there for people with technical skills, English language skills such as editing and proofreading, and creative art skills than there is for people who just can write. I'm certainly not knocking the creative side of it because obviously that's vitally important to the industry. But when push comes to shove, as put out, everybody's got an idea, and usually when you're making a role-playing game, it's not about coming up with a new idea for a role-playing game. It's about getting the ideas you already have on paper and into a book, printed, and sent into stores. I would say that when it comes to the company side of things, the non-freelance side of things, people should also consider that most companies that do role-playing games are regular companies. They have a lot of jobs and job openings that you might not think about when you think about a game company. But they need people who can do marketing. They need people who can do sales. They need people
like IT and web design and stuff like that, accounting, administrative assistant.
Exactly. HR, warehouse work even. I mean, it's not incredibly glamorous, but it's not.
Well, let's be clear. We're talking about big game companies when we say that there's these other types of jobs available, because there's kind of like in my opinion, there's kind of like a 3-tier system of RPG game companies right now. There's the top tier, which is, in my opinion, basically Wizards of the Coast and Paizo, which just employ, dozens, of people to do nothing but create role-playing games.
Yeah, these are the places that have like huge office sprawl.
Yeah, I've actually visited Paizo recently, so I can tell you that for true.
You'll have to tell me what that's like sometime. I've always wondered what their offices are like.
I will tell you about it sometime. Then there's kind of the second tier down, which are companies that have more than a few people doing RPGs all the time, but they may do other things, and they may have lots of jobs that are sort of related to RPGs, and this is where I think, now Sam can disagree with me, but Fantasy Flight Games would be my suggestion for that tier.
I almost put them in the first tier just because of how spread out they are in terms of both role-playing and board games.
But the difference between them, though, is that there's a very small team at Fantasy Flight that works on role-playing games, as opposed to, like, Paizo and WotC both employ, as I said, dozens of people who do nothing but make role-playing games.
No, that's I think that's fair. Our company pretty much employs 8 people full-time working on role-playing games at this point.
Which is a big team. It is. Yeah.
Because most of these role-playing game companies, from what I understand, even the more big-name ones that you probably know, like, for example, Catalyst Game Labs, as far as I understand, they don't have an office, per se. It's run pretty much out of someone's house.
And a small handful of full-timers.
And you want to look at Pinnacle, for example, is another one that's pretty well known. Again, everyone's working from home.
And I if I'm not mistaken, Green Ronin as well. I think Chris Pramas works out of his house.
Chris and Nicole pretty much work out of their house. They have I believe annual, maybe biannual summit where they get everybody together to get face-to-face time with each other. But yeah, they're all remote. And even in those situations, you can still the definition of full time gets a little woozy there, because it's not necessarily, we're not necessarily talking about, are they full
9 to 5 clocking at the office?
Right. It's they're all putting in crazy hours, but how they're getting paid gets to be an interesting thing too, because royalties are back. They're back in a huge way, as far as people are not necessarily getting paid a salary or an hourly rate anymore. I mean, yes, at the top levels, and they're just under the top levels. I'm sure that like Sam and the 8 people at Fantasy Flight, yes, they've got a salary, I'm sure, but a lot of us are working on just what we're making per sale, and we're splitting that. Fortunately, the tools exist so that people can get paid right away instead of waiting 3 months to a year before they see even their first check.
And I think it's fair to say that we're talking about, there's basically 3 types of employments in the game industry. There's full-time, which we've said is very rare.
Mm-hmm.
There's freelancing,
which is very common.
I mean, I want to kind of put on the same tier as part-time, because I don't know anybody who's part-time or who isn't just a freelancer, really. And then there's basically interns, and that's not only like actual interns, but people who are basically just working for the exposure or putting it in their portfolio, which is something I totally do not endorse, FYI.
There's been a big kerfluffle online in the past 2 or 3 years about anyone who posts anything about, oh, we want this done, we're not paying right now, but it'll look great in your portfolio or on your resume, and then the backlash that you will get from every single professional freelancer out there.
Well, now there are some legitimate internship programs that should not be tarred with the same brush.
Oh, certainly.
I believe that both Fantasy Flight, Steve Jackson do have internships, and I think that I'm pretty certain that Paizo and WotC also have some game design.
I don't know if WotC does per se, but I know Hasbro.
Hasbro certainly does, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
We do have an internship programs, and one of the things we try and do is work through local colleges as well. So even if the internships are unpaid, I believe they can receive college credit for it, which isn't as great as being paid, but it's certainly a little better than nothing.
And I do want to clarify what I said. What I'm talking about isn't internships. Internships is a really organized, it's like, okay, you come to work in our offices, you learn what the industry's like because you're just starting out, you're a student. What I'm talking about are the people who post like Craigslist ad or forum posts or whatever saying, oh, hey, I need a cover for my new book that I just kickstarted. Does anyone want to do it for the credit?
Yeah, this is not.
No, exactly.
This is not restricted just to RPGs.
That's the shady
either.
thing I'm kind of talking.
I saw a Craigslist ad just yesterday for, it said aspiring authors. Send us your manuscript, and if we like it, we will publish it. I was like, yeah, that's gonna happen. Send us your manuscript without any contract, and we will totally pay you for it. We promise.
And that's one thing I wanted to back up a little bit here and talk about. When we're talking about the jobs that are available, one thing that you guys kind of made clear, and I want to put this into a little bit, because, again, I'm with Anical News, so I'm thinking in film terms. There's what's called above the line and below the line in the film industry. Above the line would be, the director, the writer, the actors. Those are the people who do all the creative stuff. Then there's below the line. That's the grips, the electricians, the catering. That's all the people who do all the support work. And I'm just wanting to clarify that I'm understanding correct. What you guys are saying is pretty much, it's a lot more difficult to break into that sort of above the line where I'm a writer, I'm a game designer, I'm whatever, than it is to do the more nuts and bolts grunt work of editing, proofreading, administrative assistant, the guy that cleans out the trash cans. And I hate to include art in that category, but it's just because the way the industry works, that art is not really part of the design and writing process.
Well, it can be.
Am I completely off base on here, or does that sound about right?
No, that sounds pretty right to me. And I think I think that's a good way of looking at it. And I think on one level, it's never been easier for somebody to break into the above the line part of the industry because of all the options you have for self-publishing, for just putting your game up on the internet, making PDFs, selling it through companies like Drive-Thru, RPG, and stuff like that. But I think it's much harder to be making a full-time living off of that kind of work. And it's also harder to become a recognized name for doing that. I think
there are people who've done it. Fred Hicks is a really good example, but he worked his butt off to get to where he is, and he did it.
Oh yeah.
He did it almost all entirely on his own, which is really impressive, just considering the achievements he's made. But it is rare. I think I would agree with you. It's extremely rare.
Yeah. Well, and I think your analogy of the movie industry is great, because for every successful actor, for every Harrison Ford who started out as a carpenter and then became Han Solo and Indiana Jones, you have hundreds or thousands of actors who do a few commercial spots and end up
and are still waiting tables, waiting for their big break.
Exactly.
I would say it's a little different these days. And actually, I think it's a lot different these days, because let's be completely fair here. Most of the bigger companies and more established companies with the solid properties that, and all that kind of stuff, they've got a pretty solid stable, and they occasionally will open the door for a new talent, and that kind of thing. But, for the most part, they're working with the people they're going to work with, because they've got that solidity and that consistency of development going on. And so most of the new freelancers are really struggling to get in with the newer companies, the smaller companies, the ones that are doing strictly digital publishing to start with, at least, and all that kind of stuff. And so it's easier to find work and harder to get known for it, is really what I would say.
That is it exactly. No, I totally agree with that.
So let me ask you guys a question, and let's do the same format we did last time. So Sean first, and then Sam. If you had to give the listeners one thing to tell them about what they need to know about working in the role-playing game industry, what would that one thing be?
Wow.
Just one thing.
Go with what you love, because if you do anything else, you're going to be miserable and dissatisfied. You're going to be dissatisfied with the money you're going to make, and you're going to be miserable doing the work.
Okay. No, that's a good answer. That's perfectly valid. What about you, Sam?
Just one thing?
Just one thing.
All right. I would say specialize at being very good at something. Pick something you really enjoy doing and you're good at, whether it's editing, whether it's proofreading, whether it's the actual game design, or it's managerial, like organizing 2 or 3 freelancers, working together on a project. But pick one thing and be really good at it. And I think that increases your odds of actually getting work in the industry itself.
That's great. And if I had to add one thing to that, I would say just my one thing would be never ever work without a contract.
Ross, I think that's totally fair.
And I really hate to ruin your what I think is a segue here, Ross, but I have one thing that I would like to add.
No, go ahead, please.
Which is, don't quit your day job.
No, that's an excellent point too.
Totally
Because the role-playing game industry is like any other entertainment industry, whether it's movies, film, television, publishing in terms of novel writing, or anything else, is that it's a fickle industry. And sure, you've got those big breakout success stories, but those are like the 1 in 1,000, 1 in a million shots. Always make sure to approach it intelligently. And if you have a job that supports you right now and gives you the free time,
keep it
to work on your game. Keep it until the until you absolutely know, okay, I'm set for life now in this industry. I can now quit the day job and move on to this other thing.
Well,
until then, do not sacrifice your financial security.
If you produce good stuff and you're capable of producing fun stuff, there are going to be people who like it and they're going to stay with you. They're going, as long as you keep producing, there are people who are fans of your work and supporters who will stick with you. And more than likely, if you establish enough of a fan base over time, and it does take time, that's the really important point for people is, and I guess I am speaking more from a creative professional standpoint of people who get known for their work and that kind of thing, but also for editors, for layout people, for anybody else doing that kind of work. If you're doing good work, people will continue to work with you. If you're doing your stuff on time, you're hitting deadlines or what have you, then the people who want to pay you to do that will do so. But the amount they're going to be able to pay you is never going to go up to any dramatic level, at least not quickly. And getting enough of that kind of work, whether it is as a producer of content, or it is an editor, or it is a layout person, or even an artist, getting consistent flow of work that will become a reasonable full-time income. The definition of a reasonable full-time income really has a lot to do with whether you have living expenses that you can endure because they're supplemented by somebody else, or you don't mind ramen noodles and not having a car. I mean, it really has a lot to do with what you consider a living living income, but it's going to take a long time and a lot of effort to develop it up. So don't quit the day job is an absolutely true statement. But like I said, there's the fickle thing. I will say that if you are consistent in your productivity and you're consistent in your quality of work, it's not that fickle, and it can be very, very steady. It's just the trickle of income is small.
No, that's an excellent answer.
In other media, there's what's called the 1,000 fan hypothesis, which is that if you yourself have 1,000 fans, those fans will spend anywhere from $20 to $100 per year on your products. If and that's across the board, no matter what it is that you do, if it's something creative.
Does this explain UE Bowl?
No German tax laws explain Uwe Boll. Those tax loop. If you've noticed, Uwe Boll hasn't been making movies recently because they closed the tax loophole in Germany.
Well, yeah, thank God. That's all I have to say about that. But
I have a soft spot in my heart for Uwe Boll and his terrible, terrible movies.
I think probably the burning question that any listener who's going to pick up and download this podcast, they're going to want to know the answer to this question probably more than any other. So I'm going to pitch this to Sam first and then Sean. But the question is, how do you get hired?
You're going to hate this answer, but sometimes there's just luck involved. No, kidding aside, I think perseverance, persistence, knowing the industry you're trying to get into, again, going back to the specialize in and become really good at something the industry needs, and build your resume to reflect that is all important. You need to know what companies are out there, know what companies are likely to be hiring, which companies are growing, and which companies are the smaller companies that are pretty stable and are probably not going to be hiring new full-time employees. I'm talking about full-time employees at this point, but a lot of the same applies to freelancers. I think there are more options with freelancers, but for full-timers, have a good resume. Know which companies are trying to bring on new talent, and pay attention, because a lot of companies will announce that they are hiring, and they may just throw up an announcement on their website, but they don't necessarily make a huge deal about it. So you've definitely got to stay in touch.
Fantasy Flight posts on their Facebook when they have openings, right?
Yep, we post on Facebook and our website, and we just put up a small news article that says, "Hey, we're hiring people. There are 5 new positions. Send your resume and your cover letter to this email address." And
now that's something I wanted to ask you about. When you said make sure you have a good resume, and again, I'm kind of I'm the guy who doesn't work in the game industry. I just report on it, which is one of those, if you can't do, then teach. If you can't teach, then you become a reporter. But say, me personally, I don't write for Cool News. I don't have a podcast. I am a complete nobody, but I love games. I've been playing since I grew up. I want to get into the game industry, and I want a good resume. What can I do what are you looking for on a good resume when it comes to hiring someone that doesn't have any game experience? I mean, sure, I can include like sample chapters or something I designed as like a kind of like a portfolio in a way, but on the resume itself, what are you guys looking for?
Well, it's funny you should say that, actually, because Ross already knows this, but when I started at Fantasy Flight, before that, I was actually working as a reporter. I was a mild-mannered
reporter.
Something like that.
Were you a real reporter, or you were a reporter like I'm a reporter?
No, I worked for a newspaper. It was a weekly newspaper.
Real reporter. Okay.
My degree at university is journalism, print journalism specifically. No, it's full-on real reporter. And so I had some game experience. I mean, I played games, and I was familiar with the industry, but as much as anything, I had been working for a couple years as a reporter out of college, and Fantasy Flight posted that they were looking for an editor. Just somebody who was good with the English language. I'm better at writing it than I am at speaking it, to be honest. So I put in for the job, and eventually I got hired, and I transitioned into role-playing games after I was hired by Fantasy Flight, and had worked there for a year or two as an editor. But so what they're looking for on a resume is not necessarily like familiarity with games, or I have designed this role-playing game, although that's obviously going to certainly help. But what they're going to be looking for on a resume is just like any company. They're going to be looking to see that you have work experience is always nice. The ability to handle a full-time job, obviously good. The college education, I mean, for so many companies in the United States now, is not a must, but it's certainly a selling point for someone's resume. But finally, they're going to be looking for whatever job they need to fill. If it's editing, they're going to be looking for somebody who's got background being able to proofread and or edit. You know, if it's game design, then they'd be looking for that person who's like, yes, I designed this game in my spare time. And
relevant skills,
thank you. That's exactly it. And really,
so you're saying that the role-playing game industry and the tabletop game, board game as well, are a lot more, they can read through the job titles and look at the job descriptions and see what you're able to do and apply it to the job? Is that the way it kind of works? Is I've got years experience doing, say, web design and online content, that would give them the idea that I know how to write and communicate. Is that kind of what you're saying? Or
well, some of that also
off base on that.
Some of that also comes with your cover letter, right? And I mean, a lot of this is is just basic stuff when that people should know when they apply for jobs. When you're writing a cover letter, you're talking about your strengths and why you'd fit into the job. You make reference to your resume. You'd say, I am a great writer, and I would be a good writer for this creative writing job you posted because I have worked in this industry for 5 years, and I've written this blog, and on your resume, having a link to your blog, obviously. Yeah.
Well, let's that's a good answer, but that's really, we're kind of drifting more to like the general job kind of advice, I think. So
No,
let me ask.
absolutely.
Let's pitch it to Sean, and once again, same question: how do you get hired?
That's let's clarify expectations here. Hired for a gig, hired for a particular project, versus hired to work long term with a company. I will tell you that the most typical path, because what we're talking about Fantasy Flight Games, of course, that is an established company, but it is an established company with a broad base of product that's going out. So it's got a corporate profile, a very cool corporate profile, but it is a corporate profile. But it's not common, right? It's not typical as far as the RPG game industry is concerned. So the whole cover letter and resume thing, very rare that is even part of the process of working with anyone on anything. It can happen, but it's such a small fraction of the experience. In most cases, what you're really looking at from what I have seen is, first off, network. It is very much more so in the games industry than any other industry I've worked in. And if you know anything about my background, I've worked in just about every industry except the medical, and that's just because I've got too queasy a stomach. But I've worked everywhere else for every other.
He's been a male stripper, folks.
Well, if you were gonna, yeah, well, that's true. I have. I've done everything. I've been a cop. I've been. Yeah, so my point is, more so than any place else. Well, no, okay. Being a stripper really is pretty much also just meeting the right people too. But it is. It's about networking. It's about who you meet. It's about who you know. For example, my name is inside Fantasy Flight published books because I know Ross. There's just no other way around that. There's no way else to explain that. Ross and I have been friends for a long time. We met years ago. We stayed in touch and stayed friends. And this is, everybody talks about how incestuous this relationship, this industry is. Well, it is. We're one giant family, and we're always hiring and talking to and pimping out each other and to our colleagues. I mean, it really is a familial kind of experience, a big giant family with all the problems that comes into too.
Yeah, but it's much less sexy than it sounds.
Yeah, no,
than Sean makes it sound.
It's
not an episode of Game of Thrones, people.
Well, or sometimes it is, because it can get that bloody sometimes. But the fact of the matter is, it really has a lot to do with meeting the right people, getting to know them, talking to them. I got started in this industry because I went and helped the Hero Games and Iron Crown Enterprise guys set up their booth at DragonCon one year, and I had wanted to help them and get to know them so that I could pitch a product, which is how I started working for them back then. And it's still a lot of that kind of thing. And that doesn't mean you need to stalk people and run up on them and every chance you get and throw yourself, but being in spaces where they are, talking to them either at conventions or in online environments, in an intelligent way that shows that you understand their properties, that you understand the content, that you understand what they're trying to communicate, and you can communicate with them effectively about it, is a great starting place for, then, I'd be interested in maybe doing something with this. I'd be interested in maybe doing an adventure or whatever. And yes, in that regard, if you did some free content, some small bits and pieces where you posted on their forums and said, hey guys, I came up with this cool idea. And then when people ask questions, you jump in and answer them in an intelligent fashion. Those are really cool ways to show off that you are capable of a creative contribution. Now, as far as, I'm interested in doing editing, I'm interested in doing layout, you are going to need to be able to show off the capacity to do those things. So outside credits, I did this for the school newspaper, I did this for this, this nonprofit thing, or I did this because of my day job, and I'd like to export these ideas or export this talent set to working for you. That's a simple matter of, hey, I've got some editing experience, and word came down the line that you guys were interested. A simple letter like that oftentimes will do just fine without having to go through a more formal process, unless the company is set up for that. So it's really a matter of, it's a lot more loosey-goosey, I think, for most companies.
But that's a really good. That's a good answer, Sean. I mean, I think it's fair to say that you and I both. The difference between you and I, as opposed to Sam or Daryl, is that you and I both got started as freelancers, and eventually became full timers, and are now kind of back to doing our own thing. And Sam got kind of the golden ticket, where he was describing his experience as I started full time.
No, that's very fair. And I think what's interesting about it is that, as you said, Sean and I are both coming at it from different aspects. And in the end, what I think you can take away from it is, honestly, you'll probably need to cultivate all of these skills. I definitely think it's important that you, especially if you're working as a freelancer, you have to remember you're basically a company of one, and you need you need to purport yourself professionally. You need to show that you're a good risk for a company to take on when they're hiring you. But at the same time, you also need to be doing this networking. You need to know people. You need to get your name out there so that people, when people think to themselves, I need 4 writers for this adventure, or even just as Ross just did with his 3-person collaboration. I want 2 stand-up guys to help build a completely new game with. It comes down to both, I know these people and I've worked with them and they're great people and they're my friends, but also I've seen the quality of the work they've done. I mean, yeah, I think it's a combination of everything. So
your point is, if I'm a loudmouth on the internet, and I like to think of myself as an internet tough guy, and I'm just going to yap at, I'm just going to flap my gums at anything that comes down the line, you're saying I'm going to be a bad risk for an NDA if somebody wants to, maybe hire me to work on a secret IP that they don't want the word getting out?
The chickens will come home to roost.
Could that possibly be what you're talking about there?
Well, there's one thing that seems to be a commonality between what both Sean and Sam are saying here, if I'm reading this correctly, and it's I think Sean brought the keyword, which was networking, which Sam came in from one way, which he got his foot in the door by getting a job. He was doing editing work as opposed to actually game design. So again, that guy that if you've got a bunch of IT experience, you've got a computer degree, you might go in as, say, a sysadmin at one of the larger companies, and then after you've met everyone and talked to everyone, oh, hey guys, this game looks really cool. I think you should try this, this, and this. And you kind of get your way in because you work with these people, you know them. And that's kind of what Sean's saying as well, is coming in from the outside is, I'm assuming the best way to meet people to network would be conventions, because that's kind of where gamers seem to congregate the most.
Yeah, if you go to a convention and you're a freelancer, we actually had seminars at Gen Con about this, and one of the big things we used to tell people is that if you're going to go to a convention and network, which is a great idea, make sure you bring like a business card with you that says who you are and what you do and how to contact you, so that you can, leave this information with people who want to hire you.
A portfolio and a web page. If you're a writer, a blog, or even a web page with some of your, writings that you want people to see. If you're an artist, a online portfolio. Honestly, setting up your own web page isn't all that hard in this day and age, and neither is getting your own business cards printed. And I think, Ross, you're absolutely right. People see a business card and they're like, man, that guy is professional.
Or at least I know how to get in touch with him.
Well, yeah.
And I know what his name is, and I know what he does.
For the record, I have business cards, so I don't know exactly how well that professional thing really comes across.
That's totally fair. Maybe it's sort of like getting a bachelor's degree these days. It may not make its money back, but if you don't have one, you're definitely not going to get hired on it in pretty much any job.
Okay, well, we need to...
Now, just to not crush the hopes of all you college dropouts out there, I do have a very nice day job in software quality assurance, software QA. I do not have a bachelor's degree, and I've got this wonderful podcast and my glorious column in Cool News. So, not having a college degree is not the end-all, be-all, but you just got to work that much harder to prove yourself and build a resume first to show you have the experience.
Oh. Also, I should...
The College of Life is incredibly important. I went to West Point, didn't finish. Went to University of Georgia, didn't finish. I still don't have a college degree. And I've got a publishing outfit called Evil Beagle that's doing pretty okay. And, hey, I wrote a couple of books for Sam. So, it can be done.
No, certainly. And I apologize. I'm certainly not meaning to slight either of you. I was actually sort of digressing more on just general job outlooks after listening to a lot of NPR articles.
From a college degree will give you a step up, but It's not necessary, but it's helpful.
From the perspective of someone who works in the video game industry as well, I would say it's definitely more important than if you want to eventually work on some video games than to have a college degree than it is in the tabletop industry, because like Sean and like Daryl, I also don't have a degree. But I've found that it rarely held me back in the tabletop industry, whereas in the video game world, there's actually been a couple of times where people have unfortunately, kind of passed me up because of that. So it's just something to keep in mind.
I think that's one of the advantages of the role-playing game industry is that because a lot of these companies, aside from, the big names, are a lot smaller operations that, and again, outsider looking in saying this, but because it's an actual human being that's in charge of everything as opposed to this corporate machine and mechanics and, well, we have X, and Y requirements. So that might be one of the factors why it's not such a holdup in the tabletop industry, is because it's a lot smaller, it's a lot more close-knit. So it's a lot more likely that someone's actually going to look at your resume as opposed to just glancing at it and says, oh, no college degree, trash pile.
Yeah.
You didn't meet our corporate requirements according to our handbook, section 14A.
And that's exactly what happened to me in the video game industry, so there you go.
Yeah.
But
sorry, I was just going to add one other thing. As a sort of a sum up on that, from the perspective of somebody who usually ends up hiring the freelancers now, one thing that I think, so this works for big companies, it also works for small companies or whatever. It's important for anybody who wants to work as a freelancer to remember that the person on the other end, who's making the decision on who they're going to hire and who they're not going to hire, they are looking at this as they are taking a risk. They're going to be giving you a job, and it needs to come back, and they've got their own set of things to worry about, and they need to know they can count on somebody, which is, I think, why you get a lot of networking, and you get a lot of people using people who have been recommended by friends or who they've worked with in the past. But overall,
to use Sean's analogy, totally use me as a freelancer. Yes, I am there to be used. I am a piece of meat that will write gaming things for you.
Exactly. But just whatever you can do to make yourself look like less of a risk, especially if you're starting out new and you don't know a lot of people. Whether that's making yourself look more professional, whether that's making it showing that you can do the work by doing stuff in your spare time, or whether that's becoming really involved in the community so that people see that so that the people running this game may recognize your work and be like, oh yeah, I saw him do that fan supplement. I think we can try him out on a job. Whatever it is, definitely do it, but do something to make people think that you're worth taking a chance on.
And we're going to take a quick break to grab another round, but we'll be right back after this word from our sponsor.
Hello, gamers. I'm Daryl Mott Jr. from Anacle News Tabletop and the Gamers Tavern podcast, which you probably know because I'm betting I was just talking a second ago. I'm sure you already know about DriveThruRPG, as it is the biggest repository for digital copies of your favorite games. Dungeons & Dragons, Shadowrun, Battletech, World of Darkness, Numenera, Fate, and so many more. And sometimes there are pennies on the dollar because, face it, PDFs can sometimes be so much more convenient than print copies, but if you need print copies, they sell those too. So if you want to support the Gamers Tavern podcast, click on the affiliate links in the show notes and check out DriveThruRPG.
And we're back on episode 12 of the Gamers Tavern. Daryl and myself are joined by Sam Stewart and Sean Patrick Fannon. And tonight's topic is how to get into the gaming industry. And we just kind of finished talking about how you get hired. Now I think it's time to get into some of the more businessy aspects of working in the gaming industry. So if you were going to tell someone one of the best things about working in the gaming industry or one of the worst things about working in the gaming industry, and you wanted to tie that into like doing business, what would your answer be to that, Sean?
Oh God. This is the part I'm awful at. Let me just say, people tried to get me to get into being a publisher for years and years and years. Like, Sean, you know everybody, you've done everything except art, and I've even done cut and paste art. I mean, so why, people are like, well, why don't you want it? Because I don't grok business. I understand its importance. I understand all this management stuff is vital, but I don't grok it. I don't live it. I hate it with a passion. And it doesn't flow naturally for me. So my best advice is make sure that if you don't completely get it, make sure you're working with good people who do. And when I say good people, I mean really. I don't mean just that they're skilled and competent, though that's important.
Honest.
Trustworthy.
Yes. And
Yes.
you genuinely can trust them. And there's that fine line. You don't want to work with family in every situation because that can create tension at home. But you definitely want to work with somebody that you could live with at the very least. You definitely want to, and also there are certain tasks that if you're not going to be able to manage on your own, then you've got to be willing to account for that as part of your planning. So, for example, at least a very good tax person, having somebody to help you manage your taxes. If nothing else, walk away with this note. The only reason I'm able to do this is because I found somebody who's good at helping to take care of the taxes issues. Because I'm horrible at it. I have no business touching taxes. So I have somebody that I can trust that can do that. And if you have that,
this is something I kind of want to point out. Unless you have a full-time salary job at one of these big companies, if you're a freelancer or if you're self-publishing or if you're a publisher yourself, you are going to have to file your own taxes, and you are not getting you're not getting payroll deductions.
No.
It's a completely different beast when you're filing on your own. And I've done accounting work before. Trust me, you either want to make sure you understand perfectly the law, or you want to hire someone to do it. Don't get one of those little software downloads and trust it.
Caveat, none of us is a lawyer. So there you go.
That's important.
I'm not a lawyer, but I have worked in accounting, so there's my position on that. But yeah, you really, 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 if you can even remotely afford it, you want a good accountant.
I was just going to say, a couple $100 at tax season may seem like a decent amount of money, but the headache it'll save you in the long run is probably well worth it.
And it's better than a couple of $1,000 fines from the IRS in your audit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sean, did you have more to say about that?
Well, I'd also say, it's not a bad idea, depending on what you're going to be doing, to go ahead and familiarize yourself with some of the basic document type things, the basic legal documents that are dealt with in this industry. Go out there and Google search on things like non-disclosure agreements. Go ahead and read one or two. Make sure you know what that actually means. Make sure you understand when you sign a non-disclosure agreement, what it is you're agreeing to. And make sure also that when somebody hands you a non-disclosure agreement, that they haven't slipped in something that would be far worse for you than normally what you would expect. If you sign an NDA and find out that it meant that anything you talked about your ideas suddenly become theirs just because you talked to them. I'm not saying that's going to happen. In fact, as this industry is for the most part incredibly scrupulous and ethical. It's one of the reasons I love working in this business. But it's still not a good idea to go in completely blind and ignore reality. Not until you get to know who the players are and who you can trust.
If I can riff on that for a second, I would say he's got a very good point. But also, this ties into my point about contracts I mentioned earlier. If you are working with a contract and you're working with somebody, my advice to you is to make sure you understand what is expected of you. When you're exactly how many words or exactly how many pieces of art, what the deadlines are, and what your compensation is and how quickly that's going to get paid to you. Generally speaking, there's three types of compensation that you're going to get in the gaming industry. Obviously, getting paid, which not getting paid very much, let's be honest, but you're going to get paid some money. You're going to get credit for your name in the book, and do be sure to contact your people to make sure that they're spelling your name correctly, because that's always good.
Absolutely.
And the last thing is not ubiquitous, but is common, and that's a comp copy of whatever you worked on.
And that should be, especially the first and the last, the payment and the comp copies should be spelled out in your contract.
Yeah, ideally that is the case. Yeah. And if they're not spelled out, you should probably ask some questions.
I will just say as a shameless plug, but actually it's not, because it's the truth. Fantasy Flight absolutely has been top flight in regards to dealing with that kind of thing compared to most of the companies I've ever done business with. So it was a real pleasure dealing with that.
Well, thank you. And honestly, it's been a long. I mean, I just see it on the end of the person who is issuing them, and then to a certain extent makes them fulfilled. But it's been a long time developing our contract system and so forth. And I remember what I want to remember what it was like 5 years ago, and actually I remember what it was like before that because I did a very small job for Fantasy Flight way back in the day. But yeah, no.
Yeah, it reminds me, we need
sorry,
to talk about copies.
Totally
sometime.
rambling there.
But on that, moving on. I also want to call out Pinnacle as being a really great company to work with. They've been exceptionally good with me with payments and contracts and getting things on time. So there's definitely some really good companies out there to work with.
And we're not saying that companies we're not mentioning here are bad companies to work for. We're just highlighting the best of the best, right?
Yeah, and this is our own personal experience and not, just your mileage may vary. That's all I'm saying.
You gotta watch out for those Melior Via guys.
Oh, no.
Wow. Wow, burn. I would like some butter for that burn, please. Okay, so Sean answered it pretty good. Sam, how about your turn? What is some things about the business side of working in the industry you would want to tell?
Business side. Oh shoot, you've already covered contracts. And Sean, I think, has a great point about management. I think if you're working full time as a freelancer, which honestly is more what we're talking about at this point, if you're working full time as an employee in any sense, then it becomes it's a job and all that sort of thing. But if you're working full time as a freelancer, you have to recognize that your payment, even contractual payment, is going to most contracts will specify when that money's going to come in. Ours usually, for example, are contingent on the licensor approving the material that has been worked on. So that can be a month or two after it's turned in, and in something like in the industry, it can certainly be a lot longer than that for some companies. Long story short, I think the most important thing is that you have to be very good at budgeting your income and keeping track of all the different jobs you have. You have to be following up on open jobs with your the companies that you've done the work for. Probably keeping a big spreadsheet that says what you've been paid for and what you haven't been paid for, and if the company hasn't paid you and is now starting to breach their contract, then
track.
you need to send them a polite email reminding them that they should have gotten you that paycheck already. And
I have actually going through that with my last day job employer. They haven't paid me my last paycheck yet. In the time of recording, it's been almost 3 weeks, so I had to call them yesterday. And this is completely not related to the tabletop gaming industry. So, yeah, know the labor laws in your country, know your contract, or your country, your county, your state, and be aware of what you're owed and be polite and professional. Don't do what I do and scream at the accounting person. But I burned that bridge and I didn't care. What are some of the biggest pitfalls someone who's trying to get in the industry might fall into? Because the first one that pops into my mind is that one thing I've learned reporting on the industry and doing this podcast is exactly how small the tabletop gaming industry is. Everyone pretty much knows everyone, or
it is a very
they know
small
someone
industry.
who knows someone else. So the biggest advice I can think of, again, outsider looking in, but it's Wheaton's Law. Don't be a dick. Because if you are a jerk, if you badmouth another employer, if you're running around saying bad stuff, it's going to get around to everyone else, and no one's going to want to work with you. Because if you're negative, and why would I hire you if the last guy you worked for, you just spent 3 months running down on your blog?
No, I think it's a really good piece of advice, honestly. And it's even more risky these days with the way that the industry has really taken up residence on the internet. And I think that's offered a lot of great things for the industry. I mean, e-publishing, not the least of them. But it does mean that now, before if you wrote something if you said something nasty about somebody, it'd have to get published in an article maybe. But now that article...
Maybe a fan letter in the front of White Dwarf or something.
Or Dragon Magazine. But now, I mean, geez, you publish something on your blog that's nasty about somebody else, and...
It's there forever.
Yep. It is Googleable.
It's dry, in fact, you can't get rid of it either.
Yeah. I certainly won't give any examples, but, I mean, I think we all know of, like, we've all seen articles written by people about other people in the industry that are not particularly flattering.
Oh, it's worse than that. Facebook, man. I mean, there are certain colleagues that we all have who, they've always been curmudgeonly and always been highly opinionated and always been firebrands. And I guarantee you we're all thinking the same name as soon as I said that, as far as at least one person who... At one time, this person, would be like that, and it would be pretty much only in professional circles. So everyone in professional circles like, oh, well, there they go again. But their public presence before the ubiquitousness of, or the ubiquity of Facebook and social networking, not so much. You might catch rumors if you happen to know the right people. Now, because such people don't have any filters and don't care to, now that impacts their professional presence, whether they like it or not. People see that kind of thing and go, really like what that person wrote, really like what that person designed. Not so sure I like that person enough to buy anything they do anymore. That kind of...
I think, we can all point to someone like Orson Scott Card and some of the controversy surrounding him as a good example.
Yeah, I think he's fair game.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, even just these people are good people, right? This is a cool person I'm talking about in person, but online that person presents a very caustic persona when upset about something, and you can respect that, but you can also acknowledge that that's gonna create. I've even done it myself. When I've gotten my head up about a particular political subject that I think is incredibly important, I have risked and even caused bad feelings with people who support my work not wanting to support me anymore because they so completely disagreed with me on that political point that I lost them as fans and customers.
And you see that a lot on Will Wheaton's Twitter account. Anytime he posts anything political or posts any sort of link, he gets about 80, 100 people retweeting back to him. You're just an actor. Shut up. What do you have opinions for? I'm never doing anything.
Well, I think what Sean's saying is you're allowed to have an opinion, but I think what Sean and Sam are both saying, actually, is that you should comport yourself professionally, and that is especially true when it comes to the internet.
I actually have a story about this. It involves Twitter, which is another social media that will get you in trouble if you're not careful. As much as I would like to, I'm not going to name the name, but it is a person who is very high up at one of the big companies we have mentioned on this podcast already. I like Big Bang Theory. I know. Don't lynch me yet. I understand why people hate Big Bang Theory as a TV show. I understand your concerns. I love the show for different reasons, and I see beyond the flaws that a lot of other people see. If you don't like Big Bang Theory, if you hate Big Bang Theory, I understand. But what happened was they had an episode in their last season, which was their D&D episode. And it got a lot of press in the gaming industry because, hey, one of the top-rated shows on network television is covering D&D. And everyone's reaction was almost immediately insanely negative. It was the biggest hate orgy, is the only word I can describe it as, of anything I've ever seen in my life, of people just wanting to love this episode. And this was 2 days before the episode had even aired, an episode of a TV show these people don't watch. And I made a comment on Twitter saying, oh, I love how people keep commenting on a show that hasn't even aired yet. And I tagged a bunch of these people that were on my feed that were saying these things. And one of these people, which is a very high-placed game designer, came back to me, and this is after I had the Anacle News column, by the way. I am a reporter in the game industry, comes back and says, I love how you're a complete piece of shit.
Wow.
And then blocks me on Twitter, so I can't even follow him to get news from the guy.
Wow.
Oof.
So, yeah.
That escalated quickly.
So I'm going to tell you right now, anything that guy has done in the gaming industry, I haven't fucking reported on.
Okay. Well, let's try and keep a focus on the positive here, and I'm just going to kick back that one question about the stories of the freelancers.
I just want to give a story of why you need to watch what you're saying, because if you get into these sort of heated flame wars, you don't know who's on the other end of it.
Nobody wins. Let's just put it that way. Nobody wins in a flame war. So, Sam or Sean, which one of you wants to pick up the gauntlet that I have thrown of the fun freelancer story?
My first official professional Gen Con, 89. I'm with the Champions guys. I'm working there on Crown Booth. I'm helping run games. I'm a big puppy. I'm jumping on everybody. I'm peeing on the furniture. I'm all kinds of excited. Which, by the way, that's that you've got to be careful about that. When you get in by getting your first professional credit, you've got to not go crazy. Enjoy it. Embrace the joy. Don't be the big puppy jumping up on everybody and peeing all over the furniture, because I had to overcome that a little bit. Because it was like you get a big head. Oh my God, I'm a somebody. Yeah, well, whatever. I mean, you're somebody you're a Z-list celebrity at best for a moment. Come on, you got to chill and let it build up and keep doing the work is the more important part. But I had visions of, one day I'd love to be somebody that other people know, right? I fully admit this. It would be really cool. Hey, you're known for your work. So cut to a couple of years ago. I have done some stuff, right? I've got a pretty cool resume of work going on. I'm working for Drive-Thru RPG and RPG Now at the time, and I'm still very close to those guys, by the way. Would still be working for them if Steve and I had not decided. Steve Wick, the guy who owns the company, basically said, you need to be writing and publishing because that's your first best destiny. He played Spock to my Kirk with that one. But but at the time I was with them and well known for the newsletter and the stuff that I was doing, notes from Sean's desk, Brain Dice and Chips, the comic strip I was doing, all this other stuff. So I've got that going on. People still talk about the Fantasy Role Playing Gamers Bible. I'm doing the Star Wars stuff. I'm doing the Savage Worlds and Shine Star stuff. I've got pretty decent flow of work going out there. And I'm with Corinne, who's my lady love, who came into all this fresh-faced, but just bemused and amused and enjoying herself. She's a full-on gamer and totally into it, but she's still getting accustomed to the idea because she didn't know who I was. She was a gamer, but she had no idea who I was before we met, which was kind of cool. And so you got to know that I was known, and it was always amusing to her to see the reactions of people who were fans. So I have to admit, I'm kind of doing a little bit of the ego thing. I'm kind of a little bit inflated at this point because here I got my girl. All these guys are, I'm going around at Gen Con. It's Gen Con I'm talking about. We're at a party, these people are, having fun, everything like that.
You're holding court.
Holding court, yeah. So, and this one guy's like, wait a minute, is that Sean Patrick Fannon? That guy's a legend! And Corinne just cracks up, and I'm like, I'm grinning, I'm beaming and stuff like that, and I'm like, thanks a lot, but so come on over, and we're drinking everything like that. So, what was it? The Fantasy Role Playing Gamers Bible. What is it that? Oh no, dude, you did this thing that got out on the internet on AOL way back when called the Fannon Protocols for Champions. That was amazing. I didn't know you'd done anything else. I was like, oh my God, this guy was going on about some fan sub thing I'd done as an additional set of rules for Champions back in the 80s, and had no idea that I'd even done anything else. Right? He had no concept that I'd had a career. From that point forward, all he knew was this thing I'd done that I hadn't gotten paid for. So,
but he loved it.
He did, and it was gratifying. But it was still like, here I am, all in my cups about all the stuff I'm doing now, and I'm a professional in the industry. He had no idea I was an industry professional. He just thought I was some guy who'd done a cool Champions thing back in the day. So that was both. It was enlightening and fun, but it was also humbling because the fact of the matter was, that's what was matter to him, right? Is that I'd done a cool set of rules that he really enjoyed playing with back. Didn't care about anything else I'd done. In fact, as he was hacked off, I wasn't still doing hero system stuff. which, by the way, is a constant thing I get still. People are like, why are you doing hero system stuff? But that's unreal.
Hey, Sean, why aren't you doing more hero system stuff?
All right, so my turn to come in and save Sean. I'm afraid my story doesn't have. It'll actually mean a lot to Ross, but it won't mean as much to people who aren't familiar with Games Workshop and Warhammer 40,000. After I had started working for Fantasy Flight and finally was working on the role-playing game department, Ross took Rogue Trader, and he had done the core rulebook, and then he started working on Death Watch, and that's when I got a chance to start working on Rogue Trader. And honestly, Rogue Trader is still one of the best things I've ever gotten a chance to work on. But
thank you. There's that moment neat for right now, Sean.
Dude, you know how much I loved Rogue Trader.
Yeah.
The sort of the pinnacle of that was when I got to do a book called Battlefleet Coronis, which was...
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Ross, you and I both still love Battlefleet, the old Battlefleet Gothic game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wooden ships and iron men, except it's in space. And Battlefleet Coronis was the chance to actually do something that was an homage to that in our new Rogue Trader system. And at the same time, we got the word from GW that Andy Chambers... No, it wasn't. We didn't get from GW, but we had heard that Andy Chambers was interested in doing some writing for us.
And he was the creator of Battlefleet Gothic.
Yes. So I was going to say, so this is totally an insular story, I admit, for those of you who don't recognize this stuff. But basically, this was a chance to meet, to interact with somebody who had done one of my favorite games of all time. And in the end, was able to work with Andy Chambers, and he wrote up this whole section on living in spaceships in 40K that it's a place of honor on my bookshelf, and I still read it for fun.
It was like we made this love letter to this game that we enjoyed so much, and then while we're writing the love letter, the original guy who made the game comes over and goes, "Hey, can I help you write this love letter?"
That's it exactly.
and so yeah, that was truly special. Yeah. I think that's a good one to point out. Yeah.
You know, maybe that's something to take away from. The one nice thing about the industry being a little insular and a little more closed in Sean's case, in my case, sometimes you actually do get a chance to meet and interact with the people that you're like, those people are amazing. I really wish I could meet them someday. And if it was like an actor or something, a Sandra Bullock or George Clooney or something, fat chance. But in this industry, you might actually just get that chance.
Sam Stewart, that guy is a legend.
Oh, please, that would never happen.
No, I can actually pull off that one a little bit and tell a story of my own. I've only written for Antical News for about 10 months right now, but before then, I've known all the guys. I hung out with them in chat rooms for over a decade. That's actually how I got the job. Was I knew all the guys at Antical News, which again, networking. But I went to their Button-Amathon Film Festival, which is this big 24-hour film festival, invitation only, that they do in Austin every year. And there are a lot of celebrities that show up to this. So I've met people like Elijah Wood. I got to hang out with him. He's really awesome. He's actually kind of Hobbit-sized as it is, so I'm sure they saved a lot of money on special effects because he's like 3 foot nothing. I'm just kidding, Elijah. Because I know he listens to my podcast. If Elijah Wood is listening to our podcast,
yeah, we're doing way better than I thought we were.
Well, he might a little bit. I don't know, but yeah, I've met all these. I've met Mel Gibson, for God's sake. I've met Peter Jackson. I've met all these. I have spent more time talking to Eli Roth than I have spent watching his movies. And wow. For me, meeting these people is like, yay, cool, awesome, whoop-de-doo. But when I meet someone that I'm a fan of, when it's my thing, I will freak the fuck out and become that gibbering fanboy we all know. I know I've talked on this podcast before. I've met Patton Oswalt. And
Ooh.
the way I met him was I saw him on a street corner. I was at South by Southwest at the film festival, and he was standing outside the theater on his cell phone talking. I'm like, oh my God, that's Patton Oswalt. And I start to walk up to him and say, no, he's on his phone. Don't be that guy. Don't be that guy. Don't be that guy. Don't be that guy. And then, like, 0.8 seconds after he closed his cell phone, I walk up to him and say, Mr. Oswalt? It's like, I'm a huge fan, and I just wanted to say I love all the work you've done. I've been a fan of yours for years, and I'm going to leave now before I get slobbery fanboy drool all over you. And then Patton Oswalt laughed at my stupid joke. And we sat there talking for another like 10 or 15 minutes, but in the back of my head the entire time I'm like, oh my God, it made Patton Oswalt laugh. And this is before King of Queens. This is before Ratatouille, and he wasn't the more or less household name he is now. I went to a convention this past summer where back-to-back interviews that got scheduled with me were I interviewed Jim Butcher.
Ooh.
And then not only when we were done with the interview, he was like, I'm just hanging out and eating breakfast. You want to hang out? I'm like, sure, I will hang out with you, Jim Butcher. It was like that complete Wayne's World scene where he meets Alice Cooper. That was what I was doing, but I was trying to play it off as best I can. But the second I walked outside to smoke a cigarette, I'm like, oh my God, I just hung out with Jim Butcher and we talked about movies for a while. Oh my God. And then I had to sit down and and interview Bruce Cordell and Robert Schwab.
Wow.
And I'm like,
man.
So yeah, tough morning.
It's like within three, and this is like the column was kind of catching traction a little bit and everything, but this was my first really encounter with people that I, aside from meeting Patton and a couple other incidents along the years, it was my first time where it was like back to back, like a 3-hour stretch of, oh my God, I get to meet people that are my heroes. And the biggest thing you have to pound into your head is be cool. You can nerd out later, which
good advice.
Which is a very good thing to remember, especially in this day and age. It's like, oh hey, I'm going to be right back. I need to run to the restroom. Then you go to the restroom, pull out your smartphone, and go, oh my God, I'm just talking to so and so on Twitter and Facebook and whatever. And you can nerd out there, get it out of your system, and then go back and sit down. So, Mr. Butcher, what did you think of Man of Steel?
So, we're actually at the last call. The bartender's giving me the eye, and I think some of the city guard might still be looking for Sean.
Oh, crap.
So, we're gonna...
Those dwarves are gonna demand you pay breakages for all that booze you spilled.
Oh, man, I knew that was going to happen.
My bar tab's big enough here as it is.
We're going to let Sam and Sean kind of bow out and tell us just briefly where they can be found on the internet and what their latest thing upcoming you should be looking for is. Go ahead, Sam.
I can be found on the internet on Fantasy Flight's homepage, and my latest thing are a pair of books for Edge of the Empire called Dangerous Covenants and Sons of Fortune.
All right, awesome. And Sean Patrick Fannon, where can we find you on the internet?
Well, Sons of Fortune. I'm in that one.
Yes,
Woo-hoo!
he is.
The evilbeaglegames.com is the company site, but shinetar.com actually is where you want to go for all the cool Shinetar stuff, the Justice in Life campaign, which, as I said, I think we're doing the world's first true massively multiplayer tabletop RPG. In a way that has never really been seen or done before, and it's crazy and it's mad.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued about this.
Well, we definitely, I'd be more than happy to talk to you about it, because every time I talk to anybody about this, they lose their mind. I mean, Peter Atkinson looked at me like I was crazy, and then he started taking notes. So I thought, I may have started something there. But so that was kind of cool. And Lisa Stevens at Paizo put her arm around my shoulder at a party and said, "You're insane, but if anybody can pull this off, you can. But we're all watching." I was like, "Oh, well, that's not intimidating." But so that's Shinetar is the big deal, and the big thing coming out. We're hoping for Christmas. The guys at Savage Mojo tell me is going to happen. Shinetar Legends Unleashed, which is the companion book to Arise, which is the heroic and legendary stuff, which you've never seen anything like this for Savage World. It's going to blow your minds. I really blew the doors off on it with that one. I'm very excited, very proud about it. And, of course, there's another 30-something books scheduled after that. So, there's that. Of course, there's the stuff I'm doing with the Accursed guys. There's stuff I'm doing with the Battle for Oz guys. I'm doing something for Dark Voidstar Press, savaging their stuff. Savaging people's products seems to have become a cottage industry for me. So that's a lot of stuff that's coming up. I'm a stretch goal on quite a few Kickstarters at this point. I'm having to actually start saying no because I
The
can't do
hardest
anymore.
thing to do.
So there's that.
The hardest.
Oh God. Oh, when you get to the point where
and
you start saying no, be willing to say it, because and I'll just go ahead and admit this right now, because let us teach through example. Sam, you know what I'm talking about. I took on too much. I ended up messing up, and you can, once you've established yourself in the industry, you can have a few mistakes, but they're not good to make. And I made a mistake. I took on too much work. I got myself backed against the wall, and I blew it with the Fantasy Flight Star Wars project. And I'll just say that right here and apologize to Sam on air. That I'm sorry that happened, and I blew it, and it's the kind of thing you don't want to do. And it happened because I took on too much.
Overcommitment is a common thing that can happen to freelancers, so
And that's
definitely watch out for it.
Great lesson for all you aspiring freelancers or full-time employees out there. Make sure that you can handle the workload you take on, because delivery dates are really important.
And
in this
if you
industry.
have a problem, do what Sean did and talk to your developer and let him know.
Communication's important.
No, absolutely. And thanks, Sean. I'll definitely pass that on, too.
So, guys, it has been a real pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much, Sam Stewart, Sean Fannon. We have been very grateful to have you guys join us on the Gamers Tavern.
Thank you.
Bottoms up.
We'd like to once again thank Sam Stewart and Sean Patrick Fannon for taking the time out to be with us tonight. If you're listening to this at some point after the weekends following the posting, I'm going to have a blog post up with a bunch of useful links. If you're interested in getting into the gaming industry, that will hopefully save you some Google searches. Because of the holiday time crunch, I didn't get a chance to sort through the emails and comments this past week, but that just means we'll have more for next week. And just to remind you again, I'm going to be at Space City Con in Galveston, Texas from January 3rd through the 5th, and I'm working on a little surprise for our listeners, so make sure to track me down if you're there. You can find out more about Space City Con at spacecitycon.com. Ross is going to be at ChupacabraCon in Austin, Texas from January 17th through the 19th. And you can find out more about that at chupacabracon.com. God, it's a tongue twister. He's also going to be at Genghis Con in Aurora, Colorado from February 13th through the 16th. And you guys know this is the con that Ross goes on and on about how awesome it is for gaming. He's going to be running a lot of games at both of these, including demos of Accursed. Speaking of Accursed, it is now officially released as of this weekend, and you can get it right now. Just follow the link in the show notes, and it will take you straight to it. The Gamers Tavern podcast is licensed under a Creative Commons non-commercial, no derivatives 3.0 license. Thank you all for listening, and until next time, the tavern is closed.